We're getting some more indications and some new numbers that the trade war with the United States and all of the annexation rhetoric from the White House appears to be affecting Canadians' travel plans. Cross-border trips from Canada to the U.S. have plummeted to levels we have not seen since the pandemic. Data from U.S. border officials shows February had nearly 500,000 fewer travelers crossing the land border from Canada into the U.S. compared to the same month last year. The total number of trips by passenger vehicle dropped to just over 2.2 million crossings, and that's the lowest it's been since April of 2022, when some of the COVID-related travel restrictions were still in place. This new data shows a sudden change in travel patterns when U.S. President Trump launched his trade war and began to ramp up the musings about annexing Canada. So that's one measure, and again, that's data from U.S. border officials. But that's not the only place where we're getting a very similar indication that Canadians' travel plans are changing. Amra Durakovic is the head of communications for Flight Centre Travel Group Canada, and she is my guest this morning, and I'm delighted to have you on the program, Amra. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Heather.
So maybe what you're hearing in that land border crossing data won't be a surprise for you. You have your own data from February. As far as bookings, what has happened?
So we have also seen a 40% decrease in bookings from Canada to the U.S. if we look at the month of February in comparison to 2024. And in fact, over the last 3 months, our leisure brand, Flight Centre Canada, we've experienced a 20% cancellation rate on pre-existing trips from Canada to the U.S. So they're rebooking for other destinations and just simply choosing not to go to the U.S.
So we'll talk about those other destinations, but those are big numbers, 40%. 20%, 40% in bookings, 20% in cancellations. Does this harken back to the pandemic for you too, or have you ever seen that kind of a precipitous decline?
This is definitely pandemic days. We've not seen anything like this other than the pandemic.
And is it any specific destination? Is it Disney? Is it desert golf in Arizona? Is it New York? Or is it just anywhere U.S.?
It depends. As I said, it has been a 40% decrease in bookings. So there still are Canadians that are traveling to the U.S. And those who aren't, definitely, I've seen cancellations to Disneyland. So a couple, they were going to celebrate their anniversary. And instead of going to Disney, that was a $16,000 trip, they decided to go to Mexico instead. And I believe they're going at the end of this month. I've also heard of other stories of Canadians canceling trips to Arizona, to Vegas. So it's really straight across the board. But
so
also,
are there any more details there, Amra? I'm just wondering, the numbers themselves do the talking, but it sounds like you have some anecdotes from customers in terms of why they're making the decisions they are.
When this first sort of happened in February, a lot of Canadian travelers were telling me that they felt that trust was broken. So that was the sentiment at the beginning. And then as we sort of moved into March, most Canadians, when they were booking, they just weren't talking about the U.S. So it was just either they're going to go to the U.S. or they won't. And now we're really just hearing some hesitation in light of what's been happening recently. So I think there's some hesitation, but honestly, there's a whole world out there. That's the silver lining in all of this. There's so much for Canadians to see all over the world that we can really choose alternative destinations based on where the dollar holds strong, but also based on where our values more align. Destinations like Europe or even cruising around the Caribbean. Canadians are choosing to spend their tourism dollars elsewhere.
So other places are seeing a bump in bookings, and I'm wondering if that's short-term right now. I mean, we're certainly talking a lot about March break travel, but what are you seeing as far as down the road into summer and summer travel plans?
Summer right now is the time to book. Our booking insights show that if you are looking for a travel deal, the best time would be 90 to 120 days in advance. So for summer specifically, we've noticed there's an increase in connectivity between Canada and the Europe. That means airlines like Air Canada, WestJet, Air Transat, they're offering more flight routes between Canada and Europe. So we see Portugal, Amsterdam, and the UK all really gaining strong popularity year to date. Outside of Europe, we've also seen Canadians travel to destinations that are further. However, our dollar holds strong. So destinations like Japan, where in comparison, the yen, is quite weak in comparison to our dollar. And then Australia, where essentially you have a dollar for dollar currency exchange.
So that is interesting. The airlines adjusting their flight schedule, adding where there is greater demand. And we've already heard in the last recent weeks about reducing the number of flights to the United States. I'm wondering if there are any price adjustments, because one of the things that we hear from our viewers as we talk about this, Amra, is just how much it costs to travel within this big, beautiful country of ours. What about, staycations and travel within Canada? Any price considerations at all?
Absolutely. It's interesting you say that. Across the board, value remains a key priority for Canadian travelers. We recently conducted a survey with YouGov where we found that 64% of Canadians said that they prioritize cost when choosing a travel destination. So what we're seeing right now, specifically across Canada, destinations like Newfoundland, what I'm being told by our travel experts, East Coast tours are booking up fast, as are car rentals for the summer. And that's because of the price consideration. East Coast is considered more affordable. However, there are Canadians still booking for Jasper or Banff as well. So really the best thing to do is plan with a travel expert. Ensure that you know when the inventory is at its highest, which means your travel costs will be lower.
So many possibilities within Canada for sure to explore. I'm wondering, when you talk about deal with a travel expert, this moment, one of the things I keep asking businesses having to deal with the tariffs and the tariff threat is, can you survive? Can the travel industry as it exists right now, has already gone through so many changes, can it survive, or is it going to have to pivot again wholly? What do you predict for the future?
I wish I had a crystal ball, Heather. What I can say, though, is that the travel industry is a resilient industry, just as Canadians are. We're resourceful. And look, the silver lining is there's a whole world out there for us to see. We're just traveling further afield. You can make it what you want. In fact, next month, I'm heading to Nicaragua. I'm going to a wellness retreat. I just spoke with a Canadian couple yesterday who were booking their multi-destination trip across Europe. They're going to visit family, actually surprise family in England, and then head to Amsterdam, as well as planning a trip to Aruba with their family and their adult children. So Canadians are still traveling. That's the thing about travel. It brings us joy, it brings us together, and it's all about connection. So definitely, I think the industry will survive. We are resilient. There's a whole world for us to see, and we get to choose where we spend our tourism dollars.
Well, it has been nice for us to connect with you, Amra, this morning. Thank you very much on that new study and some of the new trends you're seeing as a result of what's coming out of Washington.